Welcome back to Grade With Me. We're into the final episode where we're going to be taking a look at some secondary adjustments and some small tweaks and adding some finishing touches to our footage. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. So we've completed our clip level adjustments and we're just going to add some little finishing touches. So these are what we call secondary adjustments. These could be things like masks, power windows, curves, using things like color slice, things like that. These are things that sometimes take a little bit longer, but can really help make a shot sing. So just to keep things nice and clean, what I'm going to do is actually turn on another node layer where we can go ahead and actually make the adjustments. So to do that, we need to open up the project settings, and under the general options, if we scroll down, there's an option here for node stack layers. So I'm going to set this to 2. And I've already named these layer 1 primary, layer 2 secondary, but you can call these whatever you want. And now what happens is we get an extra option up here. So I can jump over to my secondary clip. And like I said, this is just in the interest of neatness. So first thing that I like to do on a lot of shots, especially shots like this, is to add a little bit of a vignette. So an easy way to add a vignette is to just go ahead and grab a power window, make it nice and big, so it's basically covering the whole frame, and then we just want to soften it out on the edges there, like so. And then we want to invert our window. And then I just like to use either a little bit of gamma, or in this instance, I might go a little bit of gain. So we're just going to gain down a little bit in the corners. And if I turn off the viewer and I toggle that on and off, we can see that just helps our subjects kind of pop out a little bit. Especially with this shot, it kind of gives it a little bit more of that tilt shift sort of look. So this is probably going to be suitable for most of these opening shots here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy, and we'll just paste it into these and just check that it is actually suitable for these shots. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good for all of these. Let's add it onto this one here. We'll have a look how this one looks. Maybe I might just dial it back a little bit on this one. And then we'll just copy that for this one here as well. All right, I think that's pretty good for those. So I quite often just like that little bit of vignette, especially on a wider shot, just to help, pop the subjects out a little bit more and draw the eye. Now, I mentioned this shot in an earlier episode, the reflections from the sky. It was that beautiful sunset color. But I just want to kind of pull that down a little bit. So I'm going to make another node here, and I'm just going to use the color warper here, because I like the ability to work just within the viewer. So I can actually just click and just drag a little bit in this direction. And I think that's just going to help soften that out a little bit. So yeah, I like what that's doing. If you felt like this was going too far, what you can always do is come back into the key palette that's here, and you could just turn this down to say 50%. And that's going to kind of split the difference between the adjustment and no adjustment there. Yeah, like how that sits. Now, in this shot here, obviously we've got a lot of blue in the frame, and that is a little bit of an issue in terms of like color separation that's happening here. So I don't want to go too crazy with this, but I just want to show you a technique that you can use just to help pop your subject out a little bit. So I'm going to rely on a mask here. So I'm just going to turn on our overlay first of all, and I'm going to just draw a couple of dots on our subjects so we start to get that selection. And I'm just going to turn on the better refinement. Now I'm not going to track this because it kind of takes too long and it's not really important for what I want to show, but make sure of course if you are grading this that you do track this, otherwise your adjustments will disappear after the first frame. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to introduce an effect. So if I just open up my search with shift and space and we type in background or defocus background, we can apply this effect on here. And if we open this up and say mask preview, so we can see that's the matte that's been pulled from the magic mask. And what we're doing with this now is just applying a little bit of this blur in the background. The thing I like about this blur is it's quite natural. It does give the effect of a shallower depth of field, especially if you just use it in a small amount. So, you know, if we turn it up too far, it will look a little bit fake, but I think at this kind of default setting, it's quite good. So as I toggle this off and back on, I think that's having quite a nice effect, just to help pop them out of the background a little bit. Might also just want to turn down the saturation ever so slightly, just to pull some of the blue out of the background. That could also help pop them out just a little bit. Yeah, I like the way that looks. So it just gives it a little bit more separation. The other thing we could potentially do is just, you know, just warm up just a little bit. I don't really feel like that's so necessary on here. So yeah, I like the way that one looks. So that's just going to help pop that out. If you like these sort of DaVinci Resolve tutorials, make sure that you do subscribe to the channel. There'll be plenty more coming out soon. Another thing that I want to take a look at is some of these later shots here. The light was disappearing very, very quickly when we were out in this shoot. So I ended up cranking the ISO quite high on the camera, which meant that we ended up with a lot of noise. So especially down here, you can kind of see this, and in these later shots. Now, I'm going to introduce a little bit of film grain later on, which will cover up some of this noise naturally. But let's just introduce just a little bit of noise reduction. Now, I think in my normal workflow, I would probably place my noise reduction at the start of my node tree. But, you know, just because we're following on here through the secondaries, let's go ahead and just pop the noise reduction in here. So the noise reduction in Resolve is inside of this panel here. And we're going to make use of the AI Ultra NR, which I think has a really good workflow. It's quite similar to a third-party piece of software that I used to use, Neat Video, which allows you basically to draw this little box to sample the noise, and then that will pull that out of the image. So as I toggle this on and off, you can kind of just see it there in the corners. I like to just do a very small amount of noise reduction. I don't like to go too strong with it. And the other thing that might be nice after the noise reduction is just a little bit of sharpening. to try and bring back some of the detail. Noise reduction tends to wash out detail and give, like a kind of plasticky skin sort of effect. So I like to just use a little bit of this mid-tone detail just to try and bring back some of what gets lost from the noise reduction. So I think these two together, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing on here. So we'll just go in, add a bit of this noise reduction, slightly bigger sample size like so. And then after that, we'll just do a little bit of mid-tone detail. This one probably doesn't need it quite as much. And then same thing in here. So just going through and just adding the noise reduction. Now, it's really important to note with noise reduction, it absolutely tanks your playback performance, especially this Ultra NR. So, keep that in mind when you're trying to get good playback speed. It might be worth turning on like your render cache, or it might be worth just disabling your noise reduction when you're looking for your playback. All right, and then we'll just add our noise reduction here in this shot as well. Very good. All right. Coming back to this shot, I want to just get our subjects to pop out a little bit more and get this silhouette effect working nicely. So I'm just going to add a few dots on here to create a mask. And we'll turn on the beta mode again. Again, I'm not going to track this because it takes a little bit too long for the purpose of a demonstration. But let's just go ahead and add our defocus background in here again. And if we turn off that preview, yeah, I think that looks pretty awesome. So you can see the way that it just kind of has that really nice kind of lens effect there on the highlights. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good and helps them pop out nicely. Now, on this shot here, there's a couple of things I want to do. Let's just move a little bit further into it. So we've already got a little bit of noise reduction on here. I want to get a power window going on this one. And I want to pull that around our couple, like so. Again, make sure that we soften it out. So I want to be making some adjustments inside of this window, but I also want to make some adjustments outside the window. So I can right click here and I can choose to add another node, and I'm going to add an outside node. So this is going to be an inverted power window, as we can see here. And so what I want to do on this one is I just want to pull down some of the sky here. So let's try gamma first of all. Yep, that's doing what I want. So we're keeping, by using gamma, I'm trying to keep these highlights down the bottom here. So that one looks good. And then what I want to do here in the middle is I want to try and see if I can pull a bit of color into this light that's hitting her hair. So I'm just going to turn off this preview and I'm going to use the color wheels, and let's just see if I can, let's see what gamma looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then maybe a little bit of gain. Yeah, this one's quite touchy. Now, another thing that can look really cool here is if we do something that's kind of opposite. Yeah, that looks pretty awesome. Let's just make sure that this is not going too crazy. Yeah, very nice. All right, cool. Yep. All right, I like the way that looks. I think we've added a nice bit of dimension to a lot of our shots here. And the final thing that I want to put on there is just a little bit of texture. So I'm just going to add a little bit of film grain. Let's just go over to our timeline and let's introduce this before our look starts to happen. So, all right, and we'll just search for film grain, add it like so. I'm going to just choose the 35mm option. And let's grain size down a little bit. We'll turn the opacity up. Yeah, I like that sort of texture. So it's pretty subtle, but I think film grain just, it nicely ties together an image. So especially when you are using noise reduction, I think it just brings some of that texture back into the shot. I would often start bringing film grain in very early in the look development process because it can add quite a lot to the overall look. Yeah, I think that's actually all sitting pretty nice. Yeah, that was the first project that we looked at with Grade With Me. Make sure that you are subscribed. We're going to be taking a look at another project in not too distant future, and I'm going to be diving into a little bit more advanced tools in that one. So I tried to stick with the native tools as much as possible in this particular project. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments, or you can send me a message on Instagram. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss those future episodes. And if you're interested in DaVinci Resolve training or other tutorials, you can also check out my website, colorbetween.com. And I have all the information there where you can go ahead and you can sign up to find out about those sessions and when they'll be available. That's it from me. We'll catch you in the next one. We'll see you then. Cheers.